What happens when a royal prince sits down for what should be a routine television interview, only to find himself facing the most aggressive questioning of his life? What happens when years of pent-up frustration finally explode on live television, creating one of the most shocking moments in broadcasting history? Today, we're diving deep into the explosive confrontation between Prince Harry and veteran journalist George Stephanopoulos that left viewers around the world absolutely stunned. This is the story of how a simple promotional interview turned into a royal meltdown that had the Duke of Sussex storming off the set in front of millions of viewers. But before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really pushed Harry over the edge. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of this unbelievable exchange. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in New York. Prince Harry had arrived to promote his latest charitable initiative. Expecting the usual softball questions about his work with veterans and his life in California, the production team had briefed both parties that this would be a friendly, upbeat segment to close out the show. Harry seemed relaxed as he settled into the guest chair, adjusting his microphone and sharing a few pleasantries with the crew. George Stephanopoulos, the seasoned anchor known for his political interviews and no-nonsense approach, took his seat across from the prince. The cameras rolled, the red light went on, and what happened next would become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us this morning," Stephanopoulos began with his trademark, professional smile. "I understand you're here to discuss your latest project with the Arcuwell Foundation." Harry nodded, clearly prepared for this opening. "That's right, George. We're launching a new initiative to support military families transitioning back to civilian life. It's something very close to my heart, having served myself. Indeed, your military service is well documented. 10 years in the British Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan. But I have to ask, don't you think it's somewhat hypocritical to champion military families while simultaneously attacking the very institution that many of these families serve and protect?" The question hit like a thunderbolt. Harry's prepared smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on that familiar prosecutorial tone that had made him famous in political circles. "Well, Your Royal Highness, in your book, your Netflix series, your various interviews, you've made some pretty serious accusations against the British royal family, the same family that serves as the constitutional head of the Commonwealth realms. Many military personnel take an oath to the crown. How do you reconcile championing their cause while undermining the very institution they've sworn to serve?" Harry's jaw tightened visibly. This was clearly not the direction he had expected the interview to take. "George, I think you're mischaracterizing my position. I've never attacked the institution itself. I've spoken about my personal experiences and the need for modernization and accountability." "Accountability," Stephanopoulos repeated, his eyebrows raising slightly. "That's an interesting word choice. Let's talk about accountability. You've accused unnamed members of your family of racism. You've suggested that your stepmother, now Queen Camilla, was dangerous and manipulative. And you've revealed private conversations that most people would consider sacred family moments. Where's the accountability in that?" The studio fell silent, except for the soft hum of the cameras. Harry shifted in his seat, his hands gripping the armrests slightly tighter. "Those were my experiences, George. I have a right to tell my story." "Of course you do," Stephanopoulos agreed with a slight nod. "But don't you think there's a difference between telling your story and potentially damaging relationships that affect not just your family, but the stability of the monarchy itself? We're talking about an institution that provides stability to dozens of nations." Harry's voice began to rise slightly, though he was clearly trying to maintain his composure. "What about the damage that was done to me? What about the lies that were told about my wife? What about the racism she faced? Are we just supposed to stay silent about that?" "I'm not suggesting you stay silent," Stephanopoulos replied smoothly. "But let's examine some of these claims. You've spoken about conversations regarding your son's skin color, but you've never named who said what. You've made allegations but provided no evidence. Don't you think that's somewhat unfair to the people you're accusing?" Harry's face was beginning to flush slightly. "I protected those people by not naming them. I could have, but I chose not to. Protected them, or protected yourself from potential legal action? Stephanopoulos shot back without missing a beat. Because unnamed accusations are very difficult to defend against, aren't they? The tension in the studio was now palpable. Crew members were exchanging glances, and Harry's media handler, sitting just off camera, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Harry leaned forward in his chair, his voice taking on an edge that viewers rarely heard from the usually composed Prince. "Are you suggesting I'm lying about racism directed toward my wife and unborn child?" Stephanopoulos held up a hand. "I'm not suggesting anything, Your Royal Highness. I'm asking questions that many people have been thinking. You've built a very successful media career on these revelations. Some might say you've monetized your family trauma. How do you respond to that criticism?" Harry's eyes flashed with anger. "Monetized, George. I walked away from a multi-million-pound inheritance. I gave up everything. My family, my country, my military roles, everything I held dear. You think I did that for money? Well, you did sign deals worth over $100 million with Netflix and various publishing houses." Stephanopoulos pointed out matter-of-fact. "That's significantly more than the inheritance you walked away from, isn't it?" The prince's composure was clearly beginning to crack. His voice rose another notch. "Those deals were necessary to provide security for my family, something that was stripped away from us. We had no choice." "No choice," Stephanopoulos pressed. "You chose to leave the royal family. You chose to give explosive interviews. You chose to write a tell-all book. These all seem like choices to me." Harry stood up suddenly, his microphone pack catching slightly on the chair. His face was now visibly red with anger. "This is exactly the kind of attack journalism that drove my mother to her death. I won't sit here and be ambushed like this." Stephanopoulos remained seated, his voice calm but firm. "Your Royal Highness, these are legitimate questions about your public statements and actions. If you can't handle scrutiny of your choices, perhaps you shouldn't have made them so publicly." The words seemed to hit Harry like a physical blow. His hands began to tremble slightly with rage as he stared down at the veteran journalist. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to have your family, your wife, your children threatened and attacked every single day." "Actually, I do have some idea," Stephanopoulos replied quietly. "I worked in the White House during some very contentious times. I understand public scrutiny, but I also understand the difference between legitimate criticism and playing the victim card." That was the breaking point. Harry's face contorted with fury as he ripped off his remaining microphone equipment. "Victim card? Victim card. My wife contemplated suicide because of the treatment she received. My son will grow up knowing that his own family questioned whether he was too dark to be a working royal. And you're sitting there talking about victim cards?" The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial. Security was moving closer to the set, and Stephanopoulos was holding up his hands, trying to regain control of the situation. "Your Royal Highness, please, let's just take a breath here," but Harry was beyond listening. He turned toward the camera, his voice shaking with emotion and rage. "This is exactly why we left. This is exactly the kind of institutional gaslighting that nearly destroyed my wife. You people will never change." He spun back toward Stephanopoulos, pointing an accusatory finger at the anchor. "You want accountability? Here's some accountability for you, George. Your network, your colleagues, your entire industry participated. In the harassment that drove us out of our own country, you profited off our pain, and now you have the audacity to sit there and question our motives." Stephanopoulos remained remarkably calm despite the prince's outburst. His years of experience in hypershare interviews clearly showing, he looked directly at Harry, his voice steady but cutting. "Your Royal Highness, you're conflating legitimate journalism with harassment. When you make public allegations, especially against people who cannot respond freely due to protocol, you invite scrutiny. That's not gaslighting, that's accountability." Harry's chest was rising and falling rapidly, his anger barely contained. "Cannot respond freely. They have an entire media machine at their disposal. They have briefed against us countless times through their so-called royal sources and palace insiders. Don't pretend they're helpless victims here." "So you admit there's been a media war," Stephanopoulos said, seizing on Harry's words. "You've been fighting your own family through the press. How is that different from what you accuse them of doing?" The question seemed to catch Harry off guard for a moment. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his growing frustration. The difference, George, is that we told the truth. We didn't hide behind anonymous sources and palace briefings. We put our names and faces to our words. The truth, according to you, Stephanopoulos countered. But truth is often subjective, isn't it? Your brother William, your father King Charles, they might have very different versions of these same events, yet you've presented your perspective as the definitive truth. Harry's voice cracked slightly with emotion. My perspective is the only one I can speak to. I lived through it. I watched my wife suffer through it. I watched her lose a baby because of the stress you people put her under. Stephanopoulos' expression softened slightly, but his journalistic instincts kept him pressing forward. That's a very serious allegation, Your Royal Highness. Are you saying that media coverage directly caused your wife to miscarry? I'm saying the stress of constant attacks, constant scrutiny, constant lies being told about her contributed to a situation where she lost our child. Harry replied, his voice breaking slightly. And instead of getting support from the institution that was supposed to protect her, she was left to deal with it alone. But you weren't alone, were you? Stephanopoulos pressed. You had each other. You had resources, staff, medical care. Many women face miscarriages without those advantages. Are you suggesting your wife's pain is somehow more significant than theirs? Harry's eyes blazed with fury at the implication. How dare you minimize what we went through? How dare you suggest that having money or staff somehow makes losing a child less painful? You're exactly the kind of callous journalist who creates these toxic narratives. I'm not minimizing anything, Stephanopoulos replied firmly. I'm pointing out that you seem to expect different treatment because of your status, while simultaneously criticizing the very institution that gave you that status. Harry began pacing behind his chair, his hands clenched into fists. Different treatment, George. We asked for the same protection that every other working royal receives. We asked for the lies about my wife to be corrected. We asked for basic human decency. Instead, we were hung out to dry. Protection from what, exactly? Stephanopoulos asked. From criticism, from scrutiny. Your wife chose to marry into the most famous family in the world. Surely she understood what that would entail. She understood scrutiny, George. She didn't understand racism. She didn't understand having her own family turned against her by tabloid lies. She didn't understand being compared unfavorably to other royal women in ways that were clearly racially motivated. Stephanopoulos leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. Those are serious accusations. Can you provide specific examples of racist coverage? Harry stopped pacing and stared at him incredulously. Are you serious right now? The headlines comparing her to Kate were blatantly different in tone and content. When Kate held her pregnant belly, she was glowing and maternal. When Meghan did the same thing, she was attention-seeking and acting. When Kate's father had legal troubles, it was barely mentioned. When Meghan's father acted out, it was front-page news for weeks. Those could be editorial choices based on newsworthiness rather than race, Stephanopoulos suggested. Meghan's father was actively giving interviews and creating controversy. Kate's father kept a low profile. That's exactly the kind of willful blindness that allowed this to continue, Harry shot back. You can always find an excuse, can't you? There's always a reason that has nothing to do with race. That's how systemic racism works, George. It hides behind plausible deniability. Stephanopoulos shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation but unwilling to back down. Your Royal Highness, accusing the British media of systemic racism is a very serious charge. Are you prepared to defend that in court if necessary? Harry's laugh was bitter and harsh. Court, you think the courts are going to protect us? The same legal system that allowed phone hacking to go on for years. The same system that protects newspaper editors who destroy people's lives for profit. That court system. So you don't trust British institutions at all, Stephanopoulos observed. The monarchy, the media, the courts. What does that say about your relationship with your birth country? The question seemed to hit